He kicks off NBC Sports on Peacock schedule every single day with Pro Football Talk Live. And he's got a new book coming out called Playmakers that everybody should pre-order right now on Amazon, where all books are sold just in time for the holidays. Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great, Rich. Great to talk to you as always.
Right back at you. Any sense about who could be up and down for today while we're getting ready for a doubleheader on Monday that we're not used to having?
Well, I know that the Browns were approaching the entire situation, assuming that they weren't going to get any of the guys back that have been on COVID reserve. They had 18 on the active roster as of yesterday.
Wow.
That weren't available, and anyone we get, we view it as a bonus. Now, the deadline's passed. John Johnson, their safety, has made it back. No Baker Mayfield, no Case Keenum. They won't play. They're holding out hope that maybe Kevin Stefanski, the head coach, will get clearance before then. Different rules apply to him than they do for the rosters. I'm surprised they're still adhering to these strict roster rules under the circumstances, but they just want to get through the game today and the 2 games tomorrow, and then it's going to be a lot easier with these new protocols to get the rest of the games in.
Well, I guess if Mayfield nor Keenum's playing tonight, and that's going to be the case, does that make the Raiders feel a little bit better? Because I know they were livid about this game being pushed. You know.
Oh, it has to make them feel better that they didn't get a situation where the 2-day delay enables Mayfield to return or Keenum, because the Raiders look at it and say, hey, we didn't do anything here. We didn't cause this. Now, it's hard to separate the unfair inconvenience of having to play on Monday and turn around and play on Sunday when you were supposed to play on Saturday, and the idea that they just want to get an easier win. And it's hard to fault any of the teams out there or the fans who root for the Raiders, the Eagles, or the Seahawks when you're influenced by the fact that, hey, we thought we were going to get an easy win against an overmatched opponent. So, there are legitimate reasons, and there are kind of like, you just were hoping you were going to get that easy check-the-box W. The Raiders are going to have an easier go of it with Nick Mullins playing quarterback, that's for sure. And, it makes for an interesting game because there's still plenty of very capable Browns players who are out there, and nobody really knows what to make of the Raiders right now.
Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show. So what is the status of the playing games and when to play games moving forward over the next – we're rubber is now meeting the road, sir. As you know, there's 3 weeks to go. There's a lot of Saturday games. There's also – a playoffs right around the corner as well. So it's funny that we're running out of time in the longest regular season ever, but that is the case,
Here's what ultimately happened over the past few days, and I'll put it like this. The castle was being stormed. The walls were being breached by the virus, and labor and management got together and they just decided to tear down the walls. That's basically what's occurred. The principles underlying the COVID protocols were starting to interfere with practicality, which meant profit and paycheck at risk as well. And nothing gets the NFL and the NFLPA together than the shared threat that they're going to lose money. And that really is what forced it. The NFLPA leadership was kind of caught in the middle because they were advocating a more responsible approach. But as someone explained it to me yesterday, the pandemic is now endemic to society. And with this Omicron variant that is spreading like wildfire and that is not making very many of the vaccinated people who get it sick, the only thing to do at this point is just stop testing the vaccinated asymptomatic players. They're not testing them except on a very targeted basis. It's hard to understand. It's not quite the same as the random testing for PEDs or other things of that nature. And they will test anyone who's symptomatic or who wants to be tested. But, Rich, the concern, I've already heard it, people are going to hide their symptoms. They're not going to come in and put their hand up and say, I don't feel right today. They're going to keep their mouth shut. They're going to keep their head low because they want to play. They want to play. They want to coach. They want to be available, especially during these critical weeks of the season. So that introduces even more of the virus into the building. The people really at risk are the unvaccinated. Now, they can reduce their risk by getting vaccinated, but there's going to be a lot more virus in the building now because they're not going to have that gatekeeping function that will keep vaccinated players who are positive out of the facility. So, they're waving the white towel on this, or waving the white flag, or throwing the towel. I'll mix my metaphors if I damn well please. It's Christmas week.
That's right.
But they're giving up. They're just giving up. And now, if this gets worse, if all of a sudden there's some new variant that makes people sicker or something like that, they'll pivot. But for now, they've just recognized widespread virus, low incident of sickness
At least they
We
believe.
just have to get out of the way.
At least that's what people are hoping. I mean, I don't know. You hear it is just as severe as Delta, and God forbid if it is. And I guess we'll find out. And I guess what's happening in the NBA and the NFL is kind of foreshadowing potentially what's happening or what's happening in real time, because this variant seems to be having a doubling rate of every other day potentially. From what you're seeing. So who knows if the way that they're approaching the protocols right now will be operative even next week. That is a fact, right?
Well, that's right. And Dr. Sills told Peter King that in today's Football Morning in America, that they are going to continue to monitor. And if it changes again, they're going to have to be ready to pivot. But the goal at this point, as I understand it, get through the season and then figure everything out after the season. But it is amazing to me, Rich, when you consider that the average player from the get-go, from the moment that the pandemic became a thing, March 11 of 2020. The average football player doesn't care, never did care, views himself, rightly or wrongly, as impervious to it, healthy enough, it's not an issue for me. It's way down on the list of the risks that I assume when I put on my uniform and my helmet and go out onto a football field. It's amazing the union held them together as long as they did, because this mindset has always been there. We don't care, we don't care, we don't care, and it finally prevailed because we're getting to a point where throughout society it's getting harder and harder to get people to care. And, here we are, holiday week, people traveling, people getting together. What do we do? I think there's this widespread belief, and it's crossed over to the NFL, that we just go forward and we see what happens.
Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk here on the Rich Eisen Show. Okay, so walk me through how Jacksonville doesn't pay Urban Meyer, even though some of the offenses absolutely would stick if it's for cause, if they had actually fired him at the time of finding out that Josh Lambo got kicked, even though they said it really wasn't part of the timing about firing him, or they fired him within 48 hours of that video of him being back in Ohio after not taking the team plane. Like, can you still say that, you haven't taken your finger off the chess piece and now you don't pay him? Is that possible?
Let's spin the clock, shall we, Rich, back to the year 2005. We both were a lot younger. You were with the upstart at the time, NFL Network.
Yes,
I was scrabbling around with a renegade website that didn't know what the hell it was going to be or where it was going to go. Terrell Owens. Remember what happened with him and the Eagles?
Yes, sir.
When it all blew up and they suspended him for 4 games without pay for conduct detrimental to the team, they won that grievance because they were able to show up for the hearing with a stack of documents that backed up every warning they'd given him, every incident he'd been involved in, every threat that they made as it relates to graduated discipline. You do something like this again, this is going to happen. You do this again, this is going to happen. And they were able to lay out a clear paper trail that showed that the last straw really was the last straw, not cover for whatever they wanted to do. And that's the challenge the Jaguars are going to have here. They're going to have to make it seem to whoever is deciding this, and it very well may be the commissioner, so the deck gets stacked in favor of the Jaguars inherently because the commissioner works for the Jaguars and the other 31 teams. But you need to be able to show that you're not just pulling something out of the air and saying, oh yeah, it was because he kicked the kicker. That was why we fired him for cause. Because it's very easy to cross-examine whoever from the Jaguars on the point that they knew about it in August. So how can it be the thing that causes you to fire him for cause 4 months later when you knew about it in August? How can you say that his failure to return to Jacksonville with the team after the September 30th loss to the Bengals is the cause that goes into this? Because they kept him around when the dust settled on that. They're going to have to demonstrate the kind of papering of the file. That's what the in-house lawyers do. When you're not defending your client in court or arbitration or whatever, you're making sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed so you can justify doing whatever it is you eventually do. That's going to be the challenge. Can they back this up, or is it just going to be this shotgun approach that makes it look like we just decided we were done with him and we're going to grab whatever we can to justify not paying him?
Well, you know what, man? There's so many reasons why the Jaguars needed to separate. To me, it was the minute he didn't get on the plane. I've heard that over and over again. I'm wondering in the scuttlebutt that you hear and talking to everybody, what they Is it being termed the biggest flop in the history of NFL coaching, or there are some defenders that there was these injuries that and so on and so forth? What do you think? What's being discussed?
The defenders, and the loudest one over the weekend was Jimmy Johnson, who has a friendship with Urban Meyer, and of course Jimmy Johnson is the anti-Urban Meyer because he came in straight out of college and he weathered the storm and he laid the foundation to have a strong team. But Johnson said yesterday on Fox's pregame show that Meyer didn't have his people. You know, when Jimmy came, he came straight from the University of Miami with all of his people. So he had all these other people, and he had quote-unquote backstabbers, which means that's what Urban Meyer is saying to Jimmy Johnson when they talk, that he was stabbed in the back. It's not anything he did. I mean, that's the one big takeaway from the interview that Meyer did with Ian Rappaport. For me, it's not about him. It's about fragile players, fragile coaching staffs, getting stabbed in the back. It's never his own conduct. So, look, here's the reality. Two things. One, Urban Meyer's clearly always been this way. The rest of the world has changed, and he hasn't. And number two, if they'd been 11-2 instead of 2-11, he'd still be there. He'd still be there. So, you know, you can get away with a lot of crap if you're winning. And if you're not winning and you're somebody that the coaching staff doesn't like and the players don't like, they're not going to put up with it. And before you know it, there's going to be this drip, drip, drip that finally results in the dam breaking, and that's what happened last week. But the challenge for the Jaguars now is going to be to piece it all together in a way that shows that he doesn't deserve another penny. And there's an important factor in this too, Rich. If you want to make a great hire for your next coach, you sure don't want that coach, when he does his due diligence, to come to the conclusion that the way they're trying to screw Urban Meyer may be the way they try to screw you in the future. And coaches pay attention to that. So if you have coaches with options and they think they're walking into a spot where if push comes to shove, they're going to try to stick it to you financially, you may not be inclined to take that job.
Last one for you, Mike. Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk here on the Rich Eisen Show. The new rule where, as of next Tuesday, so a week from tomorrow, you're allowed to start talking to candidates for a head coaching position, despite the season still going on, if they're under contract with other teams. Normally, you'd have to wait till a window opens up during the playoffs, and that created a lot of problems for people who deserved interviews to not get them. So, does that mean tonight's game, is it possible the loser of tonight's Monday Night Football game between the Vikings and the Bears is out, and there's an interim head coach, so these teams can get a head start that Jacksonville and the Raiders already have? Is that possible?
I don't think we understand yet, because it hasn't happened, what this is going to do to the normal pink slip cycle. You know, we called it Black Monday the day after the regular season ended, and it had trickled back into Sunday, just like Black Friday trickled into Thanksgiving. I mean, we get more and more of these firings on the last day of the regular season as soon as the final games are over. Now, with the clear incentive to wipe the decks and remove your coach, or let him know that he's going to be gone at the end of the season, that's the other way that allows you to do this. You've already got two teams that are in the position to get the head start, in the Jaguars and the Raiders. So what do you want to do? Do you want to start talking to these people? Do you want to get to know them? And if you're encouraged by the league's enhancements of the Rooney Rule, which are overdue and still not sufficient, to do a broad search, and you have this head start, I'm starting to wonder if the bulk of the firings aren't going to happen by next weekend. Now, what helps some of these guys is they're still alive. Like if the Vikings do win tonight, Mike Zimmer may be out eventually anyway, but if they win tonight, they're still alive for another week or two.
Oh yeah, if they win,
even if they lose, they're still alive. That's the problem. There's 28 teams still alive. So wouldn't that be something if you see a coach get fired by a team that is still alive in the playoffs, and the interim coach would take them to the playoffs? I mean, it can happen in this environment, because if you've already made up your mind, there's no reason to wait until the end of the season, and there's every reason to implement soon, so you can start conducting those interviews starting next Monday.
Well,
so Merry Christmas to all the coaches who are about to get fired this weekend.
Well, Mike, I mean, we almost saw that scenario in college football, albeit it was a coach leaving of his own volition in Notre Dame. You know, we almost had an interim head coach in a college football playoff semifinal game. You know, I'm pleased to say that it was my alma mater that prevented Notre Dame from having a seat at that table, but that's just me being petty.
Please don't open a very old wound for me as it relates to your alma mater taking my law school alma mater's coach and putting ideas in his head when there was a game that was still on the docket that would have determined a spot in the national championship, and his team was a 28.5-point favorite over Pitt, and West Virginia lost. Don't start. Don't start.
I got it.
It was 14 years ago, but I still remember it like it was yesterday.
Well, I mean, I didn't mean to shake.
No, I'm just playing with you.
No. I didn't mean to shake the Pitt snoggle tree right there, Mike. I didn't mean to. But
it's always kind of been there in college. This is a new reality for the NFL. And again, I don't think we understand what's about to potentially happen.
Take care of yourself, Mike. Have a great Christmas with you and your family. Let's do it again very soon.
Thanks, Rich. Great talking to you, pal.
You're right back at you. That's Mike Florio. Everyone, get his book, Playmakers. Pre-order it right now, wherever you can get a book, certainly in time for the holiday, right here on The Rich Eisen Show. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.